Well, hello there, and welcome to the first ever audio only episode of the Rykani-Cast. That's right, after me dragging this out for as long as I possibly could, and after two false start episode zeros, it's finally time for the first proper episode of this thing. Now, like I've said in the last update thingy, this will be audio only. There won't be anything for you to pay attention to on screen. So you can just put this on in the background, relax to it, do work to it, whatever you do with podcasts. And there will be visuals included in future episodes, at least I hope so. And currently I intend on doing so. But for now, given both my current university schedule and the topic at hand today, there's nothing that I could really even put on screen that would be interesting to you. So you might be wondering, what is today's topic? Well, if you can read, you've probably already seen the title, also the thumbnail. But for those of you for whom this episode randomly played in the autoplay, or I guess for those of you who can't read, this first episode will be about the I.C.R.A, the Interspecies Cultural Research Association. Now, if you've read my Rykani Basics writings, you pretty much know already about the I.C.R.A, some pretty basic things. And it's kind of funny, I didn't really originally think that the I.C.R.A in itself would be deserving of an episode of the Rykani-Cast, but looking back at my writings, I kind of glossed over it entirely as an institution and as an in-universe thing. The I.C.R.A is actually a pretty significant, or plays a pretty significant role in the ascendancy and in the human inhabited space of this universe. And so I thought that it'd be proper for me to give you a proper introduction to the I.C.R.A, its role in the story, what it does, and really what are some of my intentions behind writing it up and really even using it in the story. So this episode will be all about the I.C.R.A, its origins, the role it plays for humanity and the ascendancy, and the role it could play for all of humankind in the future. The Interspecies Cultural Research Association, usually abbreviated as I.C.R.A, is nothing short of the single largest scientific project ever undertaken in human history. Despite its name, the I.C.R.A doesn't actually exclusively deal with interspecies cultural issues or xenosociology. Instead, it deals with just about every research topic that humanity has been made aware of and hires people from every discipline of human ingenuity under the stars. To understand this weird discrepancy between the I.C.R.A's name and its actual function in society, you have to look back at the history of this truly titanic institution. Originally founded in the year 46 post-ascension through Ascendancy Directive No. 133/562, the I.C.R.A came to be in the early stages of the human civil war. It was a truly tumultuous time for our species. The treaty war had just been lost against an enemy that humanity couldn't gauge the capabilities of, let alone contact thanks to the relationship chart. The Earth government had just collapsed following the bombing of Earth and the subsequent planet-wide destruction. In its place rose the Ascendancy, the theocratic state whose politicians, under the leadership of our Holy Eminence, I am now so proudly addressing. As humanity was busy tearing itself apart in an intergalactic war, the scale of which could never have been thought of even by the most prolific fiction writers of the time, the founding of the I.C.R.A, originally as a rather small institution, served a number of distinct purposes for His Holy Eminence all at the same time. As is well understood today, it was created, first and foremost, to placate the voices of peace within the government of His former Holy Eminence, I.C.R.A. Given that the treaty war had just been decisively lost and that humanity was now on its last legs, underarmed and underprepared for any future conflict to be, a growing faction of humanity found itself calling for sustained peace with Rykani. Peace, therefore, had been the primary objective of the original I.C.R.A. Founded on the small border world of Lux, renamed to Discovery upon its capture by the Ascendancy, the I.C.R.A immediately went to work on smoothing over interspecies relations. Of course, the task at hand was tremendous, and made even harder by the fact that the Rykani themselves proved to be incredibly reluctant when it came to their engagement with humanity. For this reason, the first of many stumbling blocks that needed to be cleared off the winding road that made up all human efforts to engage with the Rika and to truly foster a lasting peace, was the relationship chart. Luckily, I've been made aware that all members of this meeting have already been briefed on the relationship chart, meaning I don't have to go over its contents again, although a short discussion of this odd expression of Rykani sociology still remains necessary at this point. The relationship chart, the massive blueprint of Rykani social behavior and dictator of all facets of Rykani sociology down to the smallest detail, was discovered to have a fatal flaw. While it documented every part and parcel of Rykani sociology down to the smallest bit of minutiae, it also gave strict boundaries to the exact individuals a Rika could be in a relationship with at any given point. While the Rika had been thoughtful enough to include themselves, and later on their virtualized artificial intelligences into the chart, their kind had never truly entertained the idea of being met with an alien species of similar intelligence to theirs. Once humanity had finally become aware of its Rykani observers, this little oversight, therefore, lit the fuse on a series of events that soon spiraled into what is now known as the Treaty War. One must understand that the Rika map all their relationships with other sapient beings along the chart, and the chart, in return, tells the Rika how to interact with that other individual given the mapped relationship. However, once their kind found themselves face to face with another species of proper sapiens which, even worse, could communicate verbally and had its own understanding of relationships and emotions, things quickly turned awkward. The question at hand was, could you communicate with others without being in a relationship with them? And the answer was no, but also kind of. Any communication that were to take place between a Rika and a human had to be in the form of interactions that fell well outside of the relationship chart. These methods of interaction are generally explained to our students as a sort of pet-like association. This meaning not necessarily that the Rika treat humans like pets, or in any way similar to how us humans would treat cats or dogs, but simply that the Rika and we humans both treat our relationships as being fully incompatible with one another. An example of this could be your own pet. Think of your cat, for example. You can certainly be friendly with your cat, feed it, pet it, and play with it. However, neither you yourself nor your cat would truly consider this relationship to be a proper friendship. Instead, you're dealing with a cordial relationship between two entities that have a very different conceptions of sociology and relationships as a whole. This is the loophole that we at the I.C.R.A. exploit during our interactions with the Rika. Still, as you might imagine, the relationship chart made things incredibly difficult throughout the early I.C.R.A. period. Recruiting Rykani individuals that were willing to engage with humanity was a very difficult task that took decades of fruitless labor before showing the first results. However, the Rika themselves weren't the only part of this puzzle that was proven difficult to work with. Just like how many Rika found themselves unwilling to engage with humanity following the conclusion of the Treaty War, the reverse was also true. The founding of the I.C.R.A. at the time turned into an incredibly divisive, controversial, and inflammatory issue on the human side of the aisle. Given the massive losses our kind had taken during the Treaty War and the subsequent destruction of much of the human-inhabited worlds, not only through the Treaty War, but also the ensuing human civil war, the founding of our institution was taken as a very definitive, very consequential, and incredibly controversial stance by His Holy Eminence, the late Howell Rees. Simply said, through its sheer existence, the I.C.R.A. was a statement signaling that war between the Ascendancy and the Rika was inconceivable for the near future. While some factions within the Ascendancy's political circles, especially those directly surrounding His Holy Eminence, received news of the founding of the I.C.R.A. with joy, the politically less engaged majority, and especially the soldiers and sailors fighting in the trenches and war fleets of the human-colonized galaxy, made their lack of enthusiasm well known over the following years. However, with his authority unquestioned, and any resistance leader already in open hostility with the Ascendancy and His Holy Eminence, there really was nothing that could stand in the way of the founding of the I.C.R.A., at least no external factor. Internally, the story was quite different. The founding of the I.C.R.A. turned out to be a complete disaster pretty much from the start. With no Rykar willing to engage with human researchers of the association, their efforts were made solely dependent on distant observations, and all attempts of smoothing out interspecies relationships were made wholly impossible. As a result, the I.C.R.A.'s efforts quickly shifted away from engaging in xenodiplomacy towards other types of Rykani research, in a desperate bid to endear at least some individuals of that species towards the cause and to make cooperations more likely for at least a small subset of humans within the I.C.R.A. that were accustomed to Rykani cultures, linguistics, the sociology, physiology, and psychology. As these initial efforts eventually saw some small measures of success, and once the first Rykani-Sartiels were successfully recruited into the association, the I.C.R.A. also got started on what is today our biggest topic of research, backwards engineering. The Rykar, being as technologically advanced and as capable in engineering as they have proven themselves to be during the Treaty War, possess technology that is truly a point of envy for humanity. It is therefore no surprise that the focus of not just the I.C.R.A.'s leadership, but especially of His Holy Eminence and his surrounding political advisors, turned to the art of reverse engineering these technologies. After all, if such measures were ever to be successful in any small part, they would carry massive consequences for humanity and its future with them. If humankind were solely able to backwards engineer Rykani FTL technology, a capability that humanity at this point doesn't possess, backed by an entire field of science that humanity is currently incapable of understanding, the consequences would be inconceivable. If nothing else, it would put humanity on an equal footing with the Rykar in a single scientific field, and that is to neglect all the economic, scientific, and cultural consequences that would inevitably both precede and follow the development of our own faster-than-light technology. With the prospect of successful backwards engineering Rykani technology high in the mind of the Holy Eminence, his political advisors, and subsequent successors, it is no wonder that the I.C.R.A. would expand as quickly as it did. As of today, 50 standard years after the founding of the I.C.R.A., our institution has already become the single largest economic contributor to the planet of discovery. This comes in addition to the fact that its takeover, while certainly having been a brutal fight, also proceeded very quickly, leaving most of the planetary infrastructure in place. A fortunate circumstance that the I.C.R.A. has since exploited. The I.C.R.A. therefore stands as a rare, perfect blue pearl in the waves of chaos that result from the ongoing human civil war. This contrast is also further exaggerated by the destruction that reigns on most other worlds across our human inhabited space. As entire planets are turned to ash during the righteous reconquest by His Holy Eminence, discovery itself drifts through space, almost unaffected, undamaged, prosperous, and thriving. Of course, no sides of the conflict have so far proven willing to attack the I.C.R.A. To date, all rebel factions fighting against the ascendancy have refrained from even as much as threatening I.C.R.A. scientists, mostly in fear of alienating its leadership and having the experimental technology developed through the I.C.R.A. turned against themselves. Similarly, also, the ascendancy leadership, under His Holy Eminence, has graciously offered our institution a great set of liberties in our thought, even if some ideas circulating within our halls might otherwise be divergent from usual ascendancy doctrine. We acknowledge and respect deeply that our promised returns of successful I.C.R.A. research efforts are deemed too valuable for the ascendancy to risk any failures by executing tighter political, societal, and theological controls on the association. Of course, I would like to emphasize that this isn't meant to imply that the leadership of the I.C.R.A. entertains any thoughts of dissent against any part of the ascendancy. Quite the contrary. Given the expected large fraction of researchers with xenophilic intentions within the I.C.R.A., most of our leadership deems the ascendancy to be the only faction currently fighting in the human civil war that promises a prosperous future for humanity by avoiding another bloodshed conflict with the Rykani. As of today, the year being 96 post-ascension, the I.C.R.A. research efforts include the following departments: xenobiology, xenosociology, xenopsychology, xenolinguistics and philosophy, xenodiplomacy, xenomathematics, several fields that are classed under the term novel and unorthodox physics. These fields contribute to a larger research effort by the I.C.R.A. trying to backwards engineer the Rykani understanding of physics. While the Rykani methodology of explaining the universe around them has so far proven itself to be wholly incompatible with the newest human research in these same fields, there is a great belief that the Rykani possess a better understanding of at least some of these topics, given their, at this point, proven applied usage of these physical principles across all their technology. And finally, the entire field of experimental engineering. This term, experimental engineering, basically serves to obfuscate the true nature of our goals to the outside world. As you can probably surmise, this entire field covers the backwards engineering efforts of the I.C.R.A. and stands as its most secretive institution. Only the best of the best are assigned to the experimental engineering institutions, and the resulting research that could come from this department stand as the biggest point of hope for humanity's future. Thanks to the I.C.R.A.'s wide-reaching research efforts, it stands out as a rare beacon of light for a humanity that has now been stuck in civil strife for almost a century. However, all of the promised future gains that humanity intends to achieve fully depend on our successful research and reverse engineering, as well as the dubious hope of the Rykani standing idly by as humanity catches up to them technologically. Should the Rykani deem a recovering and soon rising humanity as a threat to their own existence, it could very well be argued that the I.C.R.A.'s research goals actually threaten to push humanity to its own doom. This is a stance taken by many enemies of the ascendancy and is wholly eminent. However, as of today, the Rykani have yet to show a unified response to our ongoing research. The future of the I.C.R.A. and of humanity as a whole therefore still remains uncertain. Leaving these dubious notions of possible futures aside for a moment, let us return to the I.C.R.A. as it stands right now. In the year 96 post-ascension, the I.C.R.A. spreads its wings of research across 32 different planetary systems. It is staffed by millions of different researchers and covers a range of pretty much every scientific discipline you can imagine, and more than a few that we as humans can't, at least not yet. It is currently being led by the head of the I.C.R.A., Marko Sinovic, who was appointed by the Holy Eminence himself to serve as a political advisor and overseer for the I.C.R.A.'s ongoing research efforts. While this role originally limited itself to curbing any political and social movements that could threaten the authority of His Holy Eminence and his government, Mr. Sinovic has, by this point, shifted his point of focus. Indeed, in many ways, Mr. Sinovic has proven himself to be the most capable and most enthusiastic overseer of the I.C.R.A. to date. During the last 12 standard years of his leadership, the I.C.R.A. has expanded massively, becoming perhaps the single most important employer and economic contributor of humanity to date. By now, the different research departments of the I.C.R.A. spread themselves out across the entire planet of discovery, each department having its own massive lecture compound, and each compound being led by its own lead researcher. You, of course, have already heard many of our lead researchers preview on the most important aspects of Rykani society today. It could very well be argued that the I.C.R.A., as well as its research efforts, are still in their infancy period. In fact, most of us are perfectly willing to admit that chaos still rules the day every day at the I.C.R.A. This is not just the case because of the research fields, as well as their methodologies, being underdeveloped, but also because of our Rykani research assistants having proven themselves immensely difficult to work with. Even outside of the relationship chart and the restriction it places on humanoid Rykani relations, The general aloofness and acutely different behaviors of theirs have proven a point of conflict and disorder time and time again. This disorderly conduct has not just put pressure on Mr. Zinovich or been taken note of by His Holy Eminence. Instead, the I.C.R.A. has gained a status as an organization of mad scientists, lovers of the Rykani, that make no moral judgments within their own research efforts. Several fatalities, caused either by human Rykani interactions or human experiments with highly unorthodox technology, have further cemented this idea and shaken humanity's trust in the I.C.R.A. as a whole. However, just on the heels of another one of these fatal controversies, we at the I.C.R.A. have managed to land a propaganda coup both for ourselves and the ascendancy as a whole in the form of the Rykani Exchange Program, usually shortened to REP. The idea behind the Rykani Exchange Program was simple. As has been talked about several times today, human Rykani interactions are proving themselves immensely difficult. This is not entirely to blame on the relationship chart, but also on the fundamental differences that are to be expected when two species that have grown up and evolved on two completely different planets with two completely different perceptions of the universe that surrounds them interact socially. Still, if humanity wishes to conduct a future of cooperation with the Rykani, both sides need to put their differences aside and develop a framework of a mutually acceptable social conduct. This is exactly what the Rykani Exchange Program intends to achieve, the idea being as follows. As part of the Rykani Exchange Program, the I.C.R.A. recruits top-performing individuals from universities all across the Ascendancy's controlled territories. These individuals are offered a 6-month-long, all-expenses-paid trip to Discovery on board a chartered Rykani FTL-capable ship to take part in the Rykani Exchange Program. The goal of this exchange is simple. During the first days of the exchange, the students are assigned a Rykani partner with whom they are to socially engage with. However, before engaging with the Rykani individuals, human participants of the exchange program first undertake a 2.5-month-long period of all-day lectures. These lectures are supposed to convey the required basics of Rykani sociology, linguistics, psychology, biology, and chemistry. With all this knowledge at hand, students are expected to be capable of engaging with the Rykani in talking sessions that are, hopefully, expected to not turn into a complete disaster within the first few seconds. The great hope behind the Rykani Exchange Program is to set up an increasing pool of well-educated human researchers with xenophilic notions that understand the Rykani as a species and can engage not just in ongoing I.C.R.A. research efforts, but also in guiding political leaders of the Ascendancy in ways that avoid future confrontations with the Rykani as best as possible. Of course, to make sure that the Rykani Exchange Program goes over smoothly, many restrictions have been put in place. For one, outside of the strictly directed and continuously observed conversational sessions, the human and Rykani individuals of the I.C.R.A. compound are kept fully separate. This is not just done to avoid potential social interactions that could easily jeopardize our efforts by turning into a galaxy-wide interspecies scandal, but also to prevent injury in case a human came into contact with acidic Rykani beverages or bodily fluids. Similarly, the Rykani individuals on the compound are also expected to undergo an educational seminar similar to the human one, although it can very much be said that the Rykani education on human customs is significantly more thorough and significantly more strict in the way it is taught. This was proven quite necessary as the generally aloof nature of the Rykani otherwise posed a seemingly immovable obstacle to our testing of human Rykani social interactions. In the best of all cases, assuming things continue as smoothly as they have gone so far, this exchange program will serve as the first big point of human Rykani social contact, a contact that is both voluntary and conscious of the differences between both species. And while the exchange program has already experienced several upsets, mostly caused by disorderly conduct by one or both sides of the aisle, we can already observe the first concrete results of this newest effort from the I.C.R.A. For the first time ever, the Rykani have properly entered the human consciousness, as well as our pop culture. And surprisingly, not in a hostile fashion either. In a complete reversal of the previous situation, there are now humans outside of the I.C.R.A. that could imagine a future of potential cooperation between the Rykani and humanity. Of course, whether such a future truly is possible depends very much on the outcome of the human civil war that is still ongoing as of today. While it seems increasingly unlikely that anyone could topple the chief authority of the ascendancy, if a more xenophobic faction were to emerge victorious from the civil war or within the ascendancy itself, a renewed conflict in the wake of the treaty war seems very much inevitable. The I.C.R.A., for one, stands in complete opposition of this potential future, and the researchers engaged with the I.C.R.A. try their hardest every single day to avoid a human extinction scenario at the hands of the Rykani or caused by humans that are incapable of conceiving a future of shared galactic spoils. While most of these humans do, certainly, have the best intentions in mind when they speak the humanity first rhetoric, and while all of us, even at the I.C.R.A., share a distinct preference of humanity over all other species of this universe, some ground truths have to be made clear at this point. Humanity finds itself torn apart, not just from the outside, but also from the inside. We were divinely lucky that the Rykani decided not to push on and wipe us out for good after smashing most of our fleets in the treaty war. In the eyes of the I.C.R.A. leadership, this time of civil strife should serve as a moment of reflection for humanity as a whole. Now's come the time for us to decide what our shared human future is supposed to look like. Even if humanity were to, at some point in the future, adopt a stance of racial superiority and decide to take over the galaxy by ourselves, no such future seems possible until we have achieved at least a measure of technological parity with the Rykani. The I.C.R.A. therefore calls on all of humanity to resist notions of, in many cases, well-justified hatred towards the Rykani. Humanity finds itself confronted with an enemy that presently, at the push of a single virtual button, is very much capable of wiping out our kind for good, with no hopes of a future remedy to that scenario. If we are to survive as a species, and if we are to look onwards at a future of prosperity, the efforts of the I.C.R.A. are both fundamental and non-negotiable. Humanity stands at a precipice, the likes of which it has never seen before in its history. While previous wars were about the regional or perhaps even global superiority of a single faction, we are now dealing with nothing short of the topic of survival as a species. This idea is what motivates most researchers at the I.C.R.A. We conduct our research to stave off a potential destruction of this one-of-a-kind species that has, time and time again, proven itself so capable of artistic beauty and scientific ingenuity. The I.C.R.A. once more asks all of humanity, if not for their approval of our efforts, then at least for their tolerance. Similarly, we ask for a measured conduct, or preferably no unsupervised conduct at all, with the Rykani. Should you ever engage with them, be aware that even the slightest incident could determine the ultimate fate of humanity. Never before in our history has the individual human carried more weight as a decider of fate, and not just his own fate, but the fate of his entire species. Humanity needs to survive. This idea is very much acknowledged across all parts of our kind. However, survival, at this point, requires logical thinking and calculated behavior from each and every one of us. Once again, the I.C.R.A. conducts its Rykani research strictly following all previously stated guidelines. We are well aware of the weight that is now carried on the shoulders of a single man, and the growing size of our institution makes this burden no easier to bear. We are optimists, idealists even, that wish for nothing but a peaceful future for humanity. We conduct our research in an effort to grasp a future, any future, If you stand against us, we have no choice but to fight against you. Not for our own sakes, and not for our own ideas, but for the prospect of a future of humanity itself. If you wish to join us, the I.C.R.A. has its hands open at all times. We offer, to the best of our capabilities, a measure of safety and comfort during these times of death and destruction. And have no doubt that any future historians will write favorably about our shared contribution to the ultimate fate of humanity. It is no exaggeration to say that the I.C.R.A. stands as the single most vital project in human history. Your views on our efforts are yours to keep, and our scientific mindset allows us to tolerate them any which way. However, I truly wish that you keep the thoughts discussed in my speech today well in mind as you return to make your daily, galaxy-reaching decisions from here on out. Through measure and rationality, humanity will survive. And that is the sole goal of the I.C.R.A. I thank you for the attention you have paid to me during this truly vital address in front of the Ascendancy's Hall of Speakers. And I will now be taking questions. Spoken by Timothy Lashkin in the year 96 post-ascension on the planet of Beth during a secret meeting of the Ascendancy Speaker Hall celebrating the 50th anniversary of the founding of the I.C.R.A.